where you see the passing of time.
The crowds in St. Peter's Square are praying like mad for the Pope's light.
Where moments refuse to die.
This is a momentous hour in world history. This is the invasion of Hitler's Europe.
And where victory lives on.
Plenty of girls are being kissed by plenty of boys they don't know, and they do not care.
You can love it, hate it, embrace it, or turn away.
Lennon was shot to death late last night outside his apartment building.
But it is a past we all share.
Come on out here and give me a salute. Big Navy salute.
This is where yesterday has a home, where we wonder what it was like back then.
Go forward, knights, in safety.
And not too long ago.
His spirit must live on.
It's where history has its place and where the past comes alive. The History Channel.
You are looking at one of America's most cherished icons and one of history's greatest ships, the frigate USS Constitution, in the waters off Boston, where she sails under her own power for the first time in 116 years to celebrate her bicentennial. After months of learning the ropes, her crew has gone aloft to set 6 of her 36 sails, her battle configuration. Stay with us on board Old Ironsides as she celebrates her bicentennial.
Captain of the deck, lay aloft!
On deck, Captain, lay aloft! On deck, Captain, lay to the top!
I'm Peter Henderson. They say the past comes alive on the History Channel, and indeed it is today. We're on board the frigate USS Constitution off the coast of Massachusetts. After a 4-year restoration project and amid great ceremony, the tallest of the tall ships and the oldest commissioned warship afloat sails again. She is escorted today by 2 proud descendants of this warship, the USS frigate Halliburton and the USS destroyer Ramage. The ship's current commander, Michael Beck, is at the very spot where Constitution's honored captains, Preble, Hull, Bainbridge, and Stewart, headed into harm's way amid broadsides and musket fire. Beck, too, will make history as the man who bravely proposed that Old Ironsides should sail again.
I think sailing Constitution will awaken in many people that sense that I can still do hard things, that those ideals and values like courage and commitment and willingness to take a risk are all represented by this ship sailing.
In the next hour, we'll bring you along on this historic sail, plus tell you the history of this ship itself, a history that begins with cannons and cutlasses and waging warfare and continues to this day with her restoration. But first, the story of this ship itself, a ship President Washington personally named to protect American trade from the scourge of pirates. September 20th, 1797. President John Adams arrives in Boston for the launch of one of America's most advanced warships, the USS Constitution. Once armed, she will carry 44 heavy cannon and weigh 1,900 tons. At the waterline, she measures 175 feet in length and is 43 feet 6 inches wide. Constitution's tallest mast towers 220 feet high, and when set with all 36 sails, will fly nearly an acre of canvas. Her cost is an astronomical $303,000. The launch is scheduled for high tide at 11:20 a.m., but by noon, Constitution will budge no more than 25 feet. The pride of the Navy is stuck. By late afternoon, both the tide and crowd abandon the biggest ship ever built in Boston to a cold autumn night. She finally reaches the sea on October 21st. But the real miracle is that one of the most important ships of the new United States Navy is ever built in the first place.
There were many in the Congress who distrusted the idea of a Navy. They were very suspicious. They were suspicious of a Navy because first it was a Yankee idea, a Northern idea. It would be manned by Yankee seamen. There would be Yankee captains. The ships would be built in New England. And so Southerners were not eager to support a venture that seemed to profit only New Englanders. At the same time, there were others who saw a Navy as simply an opportunity to become entangled in foreign affairs.
But by President George Washington's second term, privateers from the Barbary States of North Africa are attacking American ships. To stop them, Washington asks Congress to authorize money for 6 warships. March 1794. By a vote of 50 to 39, Congress passes an act to provide naval armament, but only if war continues with the Barbary States.
If a peace treaty was signed with those nations, then that would halt the building of these vessels. And ironically, there was a peace treaty signed. And so they did. However, President Washington said, well, of the 6, there are 3 that are sort of farther ahead along in their construction. Let us concentrate on finishing those 3.
Built for war, but launched in peace. Her first years of service are a monotonous routine of escorting merchant ships in the West Indies. But in time, that will change. Summer 1803. The Barbary States continue to attack American ships. It is time for war.
We simply could no longer tolerate the fact that these Barbary corsairs were capturing our ships and imprisoning our seamen. And that was a matter of national honor.
President Thomas Jefferson orders Constitution to join the Mediterranean Squadron off North Africa's coast. Ironically, one of her first duties there is to destroy the USS Philadelphia, a sister ship fallen into enemy hands. In the early hours of February 16, 1804, Lieutenant Stephen Decatur leads 62 volunteers in the deadly assault.
Before the Tripolitans knew what was happening, Decatur and his men swarmed over the bulwarks of Philadelphia, set her afire, and were gone, and the vessel blew up. Admiral Lord Nelson, who was there in the Mediterranean at the time, said it was the bravest thing he had ever seen.
Though Philadelphia is destroyed, her captain, William Bainbridge, and crew are hostages. To force their release, Constitution bombards and blockades Tripoli for the next 6 months. Finally, the Barbary States surrender, and a peace treaty is drafted in Constitution's great cabin. At last, the hostages are freed, and American shipping is safe. But a more dangerous fight lies ahead, the War of 1812. To protect American trade and sailors, the United States declares war on Great Britain.
It is a war which is preposterous in its dimensions and proportions. For here we are, a nation, young, weak, we're not even third rate, we're fourth or fifth rate. And we are about to go to war against the world's greatest empire, the world's greatest superpower.
August 19th, 1812. Constitution intercepts the HMS Guerriere en route to Halifax. Guerriere's captain anticipates an easy victory. After all, it is Britannia who rules the waves. But Constitution's commander, Isaac Hull, is ready for this moment.
Preparedness was very important, and there was a lot of work to be done. His crews were trained better in shooting and loading, and they could sail the ship better simply because they spent their less busy moments doing a lot of practice.
In 35 minutes, Hull wins the first naval victory in the War of 1812, and his ship has a new name, Old Ironsides.
A cannonball fired by the Guerriere hit the side of Constitution and fell into the ocean without even leaving a mark on the ship. One of our sailors saw that and shouted, "Huzzah! Her sides are made of iron."
The British scoff at the American victory and mean to destroy Constitution with the force and fury of HMS Java 4 months later off the coast of Brazil. Constitution's new captain, William Bainbridge, a hostage rescued by the ship now under his command, is seriously wounded in the opening moments of battle and his ship critically disabled.
Java's cannon, one of her carronades, possibly one of the long guns, actually shatters Constitution's wheel. And as the wheel explodes, this enormous splinter embeds itself in Bainbridge's thigh.
All will be lost if Constitution cannot steer. Bainbridge calls for the Marines.
The captain sent 32 Marines down below decks. They tied lines to the tiller and then, using brute muscle power, steered the ship through the remaining 3 hours of the battle without being able to see where they were going in response to verbal commands shouted from above.
Bainbridge is wounded again, but refuses to leave harm's way. Through blinding gunsmoke, he orders his gunners to blast away at Java's masts. The long guns and carronades find their mark. 3 hours later, the battle is over. In the aftermath, Bainbridge captures Java's helm and crew, then burns the ship that meant to destroy him. By war's end, Constitution defeats 2 more British warships during a single engagement in a spectacular night fight. It is an unprecedented triumph and comes ironically after the British Navy is ordered not to engage Constitution unless 2 or more ships can take her on. The sea power that beat Napoleon cannot defeat the American upstarts. Washington's dream of a mighty navy is fulfilled. Times were tough in the new country, money was tight, budgets for shipbuilding were small. So rather than try to build the biggest navy in the world, they set out to build the very best, making the most of what they had. Let me show you how they did it. Constitution carried more and heavier cannon than any ship of her class. To support all the extra weight, specially designed columns. A different type of wood was used in her hull, and the structure down below deck gave this ship a specific strategic advantage in battle. The sights from the top of this ship are spectacular. Stunning, really. What with her masts extending some 220 feet above the main deck, her sails filling with wind. But it's what's deep below, down within the hull of Constitution, that gave her a special strategic advantage in battle. Hello again, I'm Peter Henderson. Welcome back to this special presentation of the History Channel. I'm standing at the very, very bottom of Constitution now. And take a look at this. This is one of the things that really makes this ship special. This massive structure right here weighs about 1.5 tons. It's called a diagonal rider, and there are a series of these running in parallel, running crisscross the entire inner hull of the ship. This was an all-American innovation, a special design, and it sprang from the inspiration of a shipbuilder.
Actually, this country had opposing ideas as to what ships were to be built for this country's first navy. The Jeffersonians wanted gunboats that would protect our coastal ports. The Federalists wanted ships of the line that would give protection at sea.
A debate in Congress is settled on a draftsman's table in Philadelphia when a master shipbuilder named Joshua Humphreys merges 2 conflicting ideas into a single design.
Joshua Humphreys was a brilliant ship designer. He was able to take all the pieces of a puzzle throughout the history of ship design and put them together in this vessel. The design of the ship was, for the first time in history, a design that provided both a combination of speed and firepower.
Speed is Constitution's armor, and firepower her lethal advantage. They are the design imperatives of her function, form, and battle strategy.
Their strategy was hit and run. So fast attack was their goal, versus the English and their ships of the line, which would line up and do very pro forma type battle. It was unusual and innovative concept to really change the fighting strategy for hit and run in that size of ship.
To achieve great firepower, Humphreys lengthens the ship to 204 feet to fit 44 cannon. That's more than any ship of her class. The cannon also fire heavier 24-pound balls, another ship innovation.
The British typically carried 18-pounders. Constitution carried 24-pounders. She could fire a 24-pound cannonball a distance of up to a mile with accuracy, turning and running if need be, or continuing firing before the British were able to engage. She carried the 32-pounders on her gun decks and upper decks, which were used for very close encounter, less than 500 yards, when the ships were standing off side by side.
But there is a problem. The gun decks overhang the keel, and their massive weight threatened to hog the ship, to make it bow in the center and bend at the bow and stern. To stop that, Humphreys adds yet another innovation: diagonal riders.
The diagonal riders form a unifying tie member that unites all the many sections of wood used to build Constitution across the different frame members, ceiling plank and hull planks. The hogging forces are still there. The hull still wants to bend, but it's the diagonal rider combined with the other structural elements that Humphreys introduced that stiffened the hull, that was able to resist the forces causing hogging.
Humphreys' diagonal riders crisscross the ship to distribute her weight evenly. He then adds a number of elements to create a unified structural system.
The first off is these unique deck planking, the thick strakes that we've installed. And that's these two planks here. Humphreys wanted two planks 10 inches wide, and they were to be joggled into one another with this unique scarfing, the joggling together, as well as bolted together and then joggled into and over the beams beneath.
Humphreys further adds a man-sized brace called a knee to hold the deck and hull together throughout the ship. Then, row after row of stanchions act as pillars of support for the enormous weight of the cannon directly above. The result is a rock-solid ship. Next, to blunt the impact of enemy cannon fire, Humphreys adds the toughest timber in North America, live oak.
Now, live oak is a wonderful wood, nearly as hard as iron. It approaches teak in hardness. The difficulty with live oak is that it is like iron. And in an age when there were no power tools, no chainsaws, none of that, all of this wood had to be hewn, chopped and hewn by hand. And the men, black slaves who were sent out to cut these live oak, died by the dozens, as did the carpenters who were sent from the north to the south.
The live oak is shipped to Boston, where woodworkers complain it is too difficult to cut. Yet it is these timbers, 25 inches thick at the waterline, that become Constitution's iron-like sides. Finally, Humphreys frames them extra close, unlike any ship before her.
Part of the design that Humphrey specified was that the room and space of Constitution's framing is 24 and 2. That means each frame is 24 inches in dimension by 12 inches thick. Space between, Humphreys wanted 2 inches, only 2 inches between frames. So when a cannonball hits that, or hit Constitution, it did literally bounce off. It couldn't penetrate and break it.
Finally, Humphreys takes this monstrously armed and powerfully strong ship and makes her fast with a sleek hull and towering masts. They reach 220 feet and are taller than any other construction of her time in America.
With a keel length of 150 feet, Constitution would always outsail one of these smaller British frigates. And Humphreys also established that speed by giving Constitution these very, very tall masts and these very towering rigs. Constitution carried 36 sails, for a total of 42,710 square feet of sail, which is just smaller than 1 acre of canvas.
In a letter to Secretary of War Henry Knox, Humphreys writes that Constitution ought to be the most formidable ship of her size and an overmatch for the enemy, with the speed to choose her battles. That's how she managed to defeat every ship she battled, and why she endures 200 years later.
If Constitution's design is inspired, her restoration is nothing short of miraculous. It's the largest such restoration in naval history, costing some $12 million, taking 4 years to complete. But in truth, even with the restoration, no one actually thought this ship would sail under her own power. The fact that she is an accident of history.
Constitution has undergone 5 major restorations and was nearly scrapped twice, saved in 1828 with a stirring poem by Oliver Wendell Holmes, and in 1897 by a congressional resolution sponsored by John Fitzgerald, the grandfather of President Kennedy. But the only restoration of the ship to its original design began as a routine repair in 1992. The major problem Charlie Deans hoped to fix was something called hogging.
The buoyancy of the water has more lifting power at the center of the ship, like that, and holds more weight at the center of the ship, while the stem and the stern are still heavy, but they're not supported as well, so they bend off.
Hogging, left uncorrected, will break a ship in two. To fix it, Constitution was floated into dry dock, and her bent keel settled onto sand blocks. The dock was then drained, and over time, sand was released until the keel was perfectly straight. But what happens when she's placed back in the water? Charlie found the answer in historical research dating back to 1794.
There was a report to Congress of an inspection of all of the early frigates that were being built that listed on Constitution during building all of the items that had been installed on the ship. And one of the items they listed was just one word: diagonals.
Charlie had no idea what diagonals were. Constitution's drawings went up in smoke when the British burned Washington in 1814. But he had a lead.
We knew that her sister ship president had been taken by the British, and drafts of her were drawn for them to build their leader class ships. And we also had an idea that the diagonal riders showed on that drawing.
Charlie located the plans in Greenwich, England, at the National Maritime Museum. Our former enemies had faithfully drawn President to the last detail.
When we found those drawings over there, and we actually had them laying in front of us, it was like, wow, this actually works.
Joshua Humphreys' original design would stiffen Constitution's hull. But more had to be done. To approve a restoration to her original design, the Navy had to okay the hull's strength. But after repeated computer analysis, the results were inconclusive.
The computer programs were at fault, not the Navy engineers. Constitution is a wooden hull, and a much different physical model to model on your computer than a steel hull.
Approval had to be gained another way.
Humphreys would have used a 1:16 scale physical model of the ship, and that's exactly what we did, and found out that the stiffening would be an increase of 10% in Constitution's hull.
Charlie took his results to the Pentagon and earned an approval to proceed. Restoration was underway. "10 tons of copper sheathing were used to line the hull. 3,200 sheets of copper were hand-hammered, with 400,000 copper nails. Constitution's masts were once made with white pine, but in this repair, the lower and upper sections were replaced with Douglas fir glue laminates. On the lower main mast, 4 pieces of laminate, 18 inches square and 106 feet long, are squared, then tree-nailed together to form a 36 by 36 square section. By continued squaring off of the corners, the mast surface is then rounded and then hand-sanded to make a straight mast.
Using the traditional technique, we iron band those together. And the iron bands are put on red hot because they're a 1/4 inch undersize of the mast diameter. So when they shrink by cooling them with water after being slipped on into place, they bind the 4 mast sections together.
Restoring Constitution to her original design dismissed the hogging problem. In fact, it so totally strengthened the ship that Constitution could once again sail. Sail?
I had almost a year to think about the mission of the ship. What I did at the National War College was to create a mission and a vision for the ship, for the organization. And when I got here, it's the first question I asked Charlie Deans was, can we sail the ship? He said, yes, but in a limited way.
After Beck convinced the Pentagon that Constitution was seaworthy, the Navy gave an order that had not been heard in 116 years. Permission to sail granted. Operation Sail 200 was underway, but Constitution's restoration did not include sails. So, a civilian-sponsored pennies campaign was organized. It served a dual purpose.
Even though raising the funds for the sails are very important, the real message of this campaign is not the sails. The message is to the children of the United States what it means to be a citizen and what the Constitution, both the document and the ship, stand for.
As children all across America raised money, Constitution's jib and spanker sheets were made in Boston, the rest in Maine. Instead of canvas, a space-age synthetic fabric called Oceanus was used.
It's a synthetic fiber that is woven into cloth, and then we sew it into the sail itself. So you can see the stitching going into fabricating, making the sails. Our sails are of the same size and dimension as specified for Constitution 200 years ago, but again, it's the materials that have changed, not the techniques.
From President George Washington to the 42nd administration of President Bill Clinton, Constitution continues to serve her country. She is the most dynamic ship in her class, more successful in her campaigns than any other Navy vessel.
When Constitution first set sail as a brand new ship, she had a single wheel at her helm, a wheel she lost in her victorious battle with HMS Java, so she seized Java's double-wheeled helm. Ever since, Constitution has sailed with a double wheel. This is the captain's quarters. From this very spot, the commanders of this ship planned for battle, determined every detail of the upcoming campaign. Hi, I'm Peter Henderson. Welcome back to this special presentation of the History Channel. In times of battle, the captain would leave his quarters and head up to the spar deck. On his way, he'd see Marines at the ready, powder boys standing by. There'd be a man at each cabin. Then he'd head topside to take his battle station. For a warship under sail to be victorious, she must first harness the power of the wind before she can destroy an enemy with the might of her cannon. Only then can a captain defeat an enemy.
One always has the duty to engage a vessel if you think there is the chance of winning. Unless you can, it's a matter of a captain's judgment as to whether the power is an overwhelming power or whether there is a good chance of having a victory. One of the considerations, certainly in this period, is that you never want to attack a ship that's vastly superior to your own, where you don't have a chance at all. So if you're a single frigate coming up against a fleet, you know that you don't want to be there.
Constitution is a great sailing ship, but in battle, sailing becomes secondary to gunning.
In battle, one has to be concerned about maneuverability and how many members of your crew that you have available to do jobs. You have to man the guns, you have to do and then maneuver the sails at the same time. So you can't have unnecessary sails, but you need to have the most effective sails that you have available to you.
With only the most human resources available to him, his eyes, ears, and experience, the captain must decide how best to approach an enemy.
Both Americans and British preferred the windward position. The advantage was that it gave you the timing when to choose to make an attack. It was also when the wind blew away the smoke and blew it at the enemy. The advantage of the leeward position was that if your ship was heeled slightly to the leeward side, in other words, your guns would have aimed a little bit better, they elevated higher, so they could presumably fire at a longer range, and therefore it was a stronger defensive position.
Unlike her enemies, Constitution carries heavier long-range cannon.
From a distance, the long guns would be brought to bear against an enemy ship. The long guns could fire a 24-pound cannonball or grape shot or flaming bags of powder against a ship 1,200 yards. So from a distance, that was the most formidable weapon. As the enemy ship came in closer, we'd then bring to bear the carronades with their 32-pound cannonballs designed to punch a hole in an enemy ship or bring down a mast.
A gun crew can only move a cannon in a slight arc, so steering the ship is what positions the guns for battle. There are broadsides, fired from side to side, and a tactic called crossing the T, where a ship maneuvers to fire down the undefended length of an opponent's top deck to slaughter men, sever masts, and silence cannon.
You really did want to try and injure the men, because what you didn't want to do, you hope, was injure the ship. You can actually take it home also as a prize, and that vessel can be repaired and refitted and taken right into your Navy.
From the captain on down, every crew member is attuned to the slightest change in wind and sea, ready to press any advantage.
What would have probably surprised you would have been the degree of silence on the part of the people who were actually fighting, and their degree of the very drill-like way they would have behaved.
During battle, everyone was absolutely, completely focused. The noise from the guns firing when they fired simultaneously would pierce eardrums. The smoke from the guns would be so clouded that people wouldn't be able to even so much as see their feet, see their neighbor.
Relentless gun training and discipline in battle give Constitution the edge over her enemies.
Isaac Hull has his men exercise at the guns very, very frequently. Consequently, when Constitution meets up with Guerriere, it's a very decisive and brutal battle, and Constitution is able to fire many more shots much more quickly than Guerriere is able to get off. And that really is a tremendous advantage when you're in battle. If you can get off 2 shots for every 1 shot of your opponent, well, how much the better for you.
The gun crew's principal challenge is to hit a moving target from a moving platform. To time the shot, a gunner measures a length of fuse and enough powder to fire a 24 or 32-pound ball as the ship rises and falls on each swell. The closer the target, the more lethal the blast.
During one particular gunfire battle, all of the guns were readied, all of the guns were aimed, every single sailor was poised, simply waiting for Captain Hull to give the cry to shoot. When that command came, shoot, all the guns went off simultaneously, firing a broadside against the enemy vessel that was absolutely powerful as could be.
Even good men in good ships do not always triumph. A host of factors, from wind to weather, from cannon to canvas, affect the outcome of a warship in battle. But more often than not, victory favors the best trained and disciplined crew and the luck and skill of the captain.
This cramped area is called the cockpit. This is where the ship's surgeon would do his work. A skilled one could do an amputation in about 2 minutes' time. Hi, I'm Peter Henderson. Welcome back to this special presentation of the History Channel. The cockpit is deep in the bows of the ship, down below decks, no doubt to keep the screams of the patients away from the men. But even for the able-bodied seaman, life at sea in the early 1800s was tough.
My dear parents, our days are filled with the most stifling routine, but we must all do our work without hesitation, and punishment is swift for laggards and troublemakers. Seamen accused of fighting are generally ordered to 12 lashes. So far I have been spared. Your affectionate son, Zebulon Andrews, July 1813.
Desertion, theft, neglect of duty, riotous behavior, drunkenness. These are among the reasons punishment is levied against a sailor serving aboard Constitution, a frigate with nearly 450 men.
Discipline was a very serious matter. The slightest discrepancy could jeopardize the ship, could jeopardize the crew. So discipline was taken very seriously. The discipline was administered at the order of the captain. The captain would determine who would get lashes. Lashes would be administered by the chief boatswain, the largest and most feared man aboard. He would carry with him a cat o' nine tails, a small whip with 9 tails on it, dipped in tar, which sometimes had pieces of broken glass in it. A sailor would have his shirt stripped off his back and be tied to the mast, and then receive lashes on his back, from 1 to 12 lashes, depending on the seriousness of the offense.
Like society, life aboard Constitution consists of 2 different worlds.
There was the world of the quarterdeck, which was the world of the officers, and then there was the world of the forecastle, where the enlisted men lived. And the twain never met. It was vitally important for the officers to keep their distance so that they could command.
The master of the ship is the captain.
The captain was a god. He was assigned by Congress, appointed by the Navy, to take this ship out and to do battle with the enemy. He had absolute power over all of the members of his crew. When the captain would come up on the spar deck, everyone would move away from him. They would know immediately that he was up to inspect them and to watch everything that they were doing. They were very nervous about that and very frightened of him because he had so much power. He was always accompanied by a Marine guard who would make sure that no one would bother him.
The captain's lieutenants carry out his policies. A key specialist is the sailing master. He is the ship's navigator, keeping track of her course.
There might be a chaplain aboard. His job was to bring God to the quarterdeck and to instruct the midshipmen.
The purser is in charge of the ship's monies to buy provisions for the entire crew, like hardtack biscuits, often weevil-filled, salted meat, and a daily ration of grog.
The proportions change depending on the ship and the regulations the captain might set in place, but it might be 2/3 water to 1/3 alcohol, or 1/2 water to 1/2 alcohol, and then you were supposed to just chug-a-lug that sucker down.
The surgeon is in charge of mending the crew's wounds. His tools are a saw, a bullet to bite, and rum. He works deep within the ship where the deck is painted red to mask the blood, and a patient's screams are far from the crew.
When the cannonball hit the side of the vessel and the wood of the vessel would splinter, you'd have these wooden pieces that would just shatter and go everywhere and be deeply embedded in the men's arms and shoulders and thighs. And so if you had something that was severely damaged or shattered, an arm or a hand was crushed or a foot was crushed because a cannon might have actually rolled over it as the cannon is ricocheting backward, and it rolls over a man's foot, it's absolutely crushed the foot. The only thing you can do is amputate it.
If a surgeon is the skilled hands, the brute force is the Marines. In peace, they are the ship's police. In battle, they are the sharpshooters.
Marines in the fighting tops would fire down upon the enemy ship, aiming first for the other Marines on the fighting tops to prevent them from killing our own sailors. Boarding pikes would be used to keep boarders, once the ships got actually close to each other, keep boarders from coming on board.
There is a range of warrant officers or technical specialists. They are the bosun, gunners, sailmaker, and carpenter, whose job it is to fashion a sailor's coffin if necessary. Last among the quartermasters are some of the most experienced seamen on board. They have charge of signals, keeping watch, and steering the ship. 350 men make up the remainder of the crew: ordinary seamen, able seamen, cooks, stewards, the barber, and boys. Sadly, the boys are one of the most favored targets of enemy fire.
Aiming for the powder monkeys, the young boys who carried the gunpowder from down in the hold up to the guns, because they knew that if they could stop the flow of gunpowder, they could stop the enemy guns.
At sea, life is damp, noisy, dangerous, crowded, smelly, with constant motion, weeks of boredom, and deadly moments of terror. But despite the hardships, her officers and men commanded Constitution to 42 victories, a feat unsurpassed by any other American warship.
This is Constitution's gun deck. This is where most of her cannon are in place. But when this ship first sailed in October of 1797, she was short of her full complement of guns, so the Commonwealth of Massachusetts pitched in and made up the difference. Constitution would not lack for firepower. The people of this country simply love this ship. It's a symbol of battles fought for freedom's sake, of victory itself. Hi, I'm Peter Henderson. Welcome back on board the frigate USS Constitution. We're about 5 miles offshore now from Marblehead, Massachusetts, the birthplace of the United States Navy, making about 3 knots on this beautiful day for weather. And what a day it has been.
Captain, all mass standing by. Push the land to the top, sir.
Day one of the 2-day celebration of Constitution's bicentennial served as a sort of shakedown cruise for the second, a chance for the crew of Constitution to become accustomed to having a shipload of invited guests on board.
Captain of the deck, lay aloft!
A day for the crew and commanders to review and rehearse the process of climbing the rigging and setting the sails and all the other complications of keeping Constitution on course and on schedule. And a day for us to check our camera placements and remote transmitters and all the other technology and gizmos that provide the spectacular pictures and sounds of the event. Day one ended in Marblehead Harbor, an opportunity for pleasure boats to draw near and admire the ship, a ship that remains a marvel of design and destiny.
She was modern and beautiful, strong and fast in her time, and I think she still connotes beauty, grace, and power today. The Constitution's history is a history of great people doing great deeds, and that history has continued to this day, and we think it's worth preserving. It's really a history of a lot of individual heroism and great people doing great deeds. The Constitution went to sea almost every time against great odds. She almost always faced bigger navies, bigger ships, and more history and more tradition than ours. And that's the history of the United States, achieving things against great odds. In her future, because she's been restored, I expect that she will probably go to some other places on occasion, but her main duty will remain in Charlestown and Boston Harbor to be a place where the citizens of the United States can visit their history.
Captain, all sail stations are manned, sir. Permission to lay aloft.
The following day, the weather was perhaps not quite so spectacular, but spirits were soaring. It is the day when Constitution would add another chapter in her grand history, setting forth under sail power alone for the first time in more than a century. It was a moment well worth the wait. In honoring Constitution's past, we honor the men who centuries ago made her a dynamic symbol of our country's power and prominence. And in celebrating her enduring presence now, we honor the men and women who have made sure this ship will continue to serve, no longer as a protector of our shores, but now as a living, active reminder of who we are, of how we came to be, of what we hope to become.
Honor, courage, commitment. The watchwords of the Navy, words that underscore the proud tradition of this ship on which we sail today. For the History Channel, I'm Peter Henderson. As we conclude our program today, join us for some of the stirring moments of the USS Constitution under sail off Boston.
Mark your head. 080, sir. Starboard one turn. Starboard one turn, aye. Yeah. Sir, helm starboard one turn. The order course given. That's on. On deck, this is Commander Miller. The captain has the con. This is the captain. I have the con. True wind. Helms and I. Helms amidships. No order course given. Passing 085. Very well. Steady 085. Steady 085 aye.